Alright, is this, yeah, it looks like this is live. Alright, because sometimes this says it's live and it's not actually live. I'll repeat myself that it looks like this is live because it's hard to say how that actually came across. But, alright, this is part 2. And I'm pretty much done. It's just the last one ended pretty abruptly because I thought it was possible could lose power. The wind isn't that bad outside. It wasn't great out, but it was, kind of windy. It was a bad storm earlier in the day, but I don't know. Privatized utility with a monopoly, it's kind of like, it's not particularly reliable, and that shouldn't be surprising. But the free market will fix everything. Yeah, it's a privatized utility with a monopoly. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. Yeah. At this point, we're lucky to have electricity uh, ever in this place. But power was out for, I don't know, must be about 30 kilometers that way and another 30 kilometers that way, and right in the middle of no power. But it's warming up. The sound quality might be somewhat diminished by the noise of an electric heater going in the background. Actually, two electric heaters. But I'm back. And I think if I didn't get my final thoughts on the whole Star Trek canon versus Prime thing, uh, in the past, what was considered Star Trek canon, what was considered canonical Star Trek, was not really thought of as a specific universe. While you could say that the apocryphal or non canonical Star Trek materials could have been considered offshoot universes, like, for example, there would be a universe of novels. The novels were deliberately inconsistent for quite some time, and I'm not sure what the cats are doing, but I don't think they're going to cause any problems. I don't know. Cats have been hyperactive when the power went out, and then when the power came back. At least they're not fighting. Anyway, yeah, I was distracted by the cats doing something over there. Like with the novels, you could have a series of novels that were interconnected. At one point, they were deliberately not connected to each other because they were deliberately just offshoot stories that could take place during the between episodes of the TV show, but you weren't meant to expect all of them to, you know, they were basically trying to think of the right word to describe the fact that they were kind of treated as disposable stories. The thing that I really liked about Star Wars, and I'm not a big fan of the movies. I liked Episode 4 and I liked Episode 3, and I thought Episode 2 was okay. The other ones were a little too silly for me, and I hated Episode 7 and 8. But, Episodes 4 and 3 I do really like. Um, but what I really liked about Star Wars was they had a level of canonical value to their expanded media. If it was an old Marvel Comics version of Star Wars from the late 70s, early 80s, then it's kind of an other universe. It basically wasn't really canonical. But the comics published by Dark Horse Comics, as well as the novels, as long as the movies didn't contradict them, there was a very distinct level of canon to them. They were all valued to the series. You had great video games like Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, a lot of really great books, and really good comics. So while neither here nor there on the Star Wars movies, I do really like both Episode 4 and Episode 3. So I do definitely like some of the movies. What was really special to me was with Star Wars was the expanded universe, which is now known as the Legends universe because under the current regime they got rid of all that stuff and then they started over with a new canonical expanded universe. And they just did away with all the old stuff, which also pretty much did away with my interest in Star Wars. I mean, Rogue One seemed all right. I mean, I fell asleep, so but it wasn't as painful as Episode 7 or 8. But whatever. What was I gonna say? Star Wars. There was a different treatment for its expanded universe material. With Star Trek, what was canon was all one universe, yes, but everything else was supposed to bend to canon. With the novels, when they finally got more interconnected, it was clear that most of the novels could take place in the same universe, but some would take place in a different universe. For example, the William Shatner novels, as well as a few other novels that were written to take place in the universe of stories he had written, could be considered to be one alternate universe of Star Trek, while the regular novels another. But whatever happened in any of those non-canonical universes of Star Trek, they were all supposed to bend or alter or change to match any new information that came out in canonical Star Trek. And they would all try to mirror each other to a certain degree or other. Because the word canon usually doesn't mean a specific universe. To say something is canonical almost always means it's official. So it does seem kind of almost in its own way wrong to say the Star Trek canon universe, because just what's generally meant by canon. It's kind of like it basically means official. It basically means official. The official. So I suppose it doesn't necessarily mean official. It means the accepted, correct universe, which in a way is kind of appropriate to call the alternate series, and I mean series is however you pronounce a plural version of series. Because you have the Kelvin universe and you have the Prime universe, neither of which are canon. It seems awkward to say that the canon universe is separate from those, because in the past, canon meant what everything else was supposed to bend to alter, to conform to. And while you could add to canon, you could retroactively contradict canon by bringing in new canon that overwrites old canon. That's where the term retcon comes from. But to say canon and to refer to something as canon usually meant anything that's not canon in that series had to conform to canon. So it's kind of an awkward way to think of things in a way when I look at it, because it's like the Star Trek comics. They were non-canonical, but they were written as though they took place in the same universe as traditional Star Trek. The TV shows and movies and so forth. Prior to the J.J. Abrams movies creating a. Okay, looks like this thing's back. Alright, so having connection problem issues, but I was just trying to finish off my thoughts on the difference between that. It's kind of obvious to me that the new Star Trek universes, Discovery and the Kelvin universe, those two new Star Trek universes are not the same universe as what was portrayed in canonical Star Trek of the past. It does seem kind of awkward to have to say that the old universe is the canon universe. It was obviously misleading to refer to Discovery as being in the Prime universe, and then doing everything you could to contradict that idea. But ultimately, what will determine what is canonical Star Trek. Using the word canonical to mean what it truly means will be, after all is said and done, when Star Trek Discovery is over and done with, the copyright holders of Star Trek, which may or may not be CBS in the future, maybe Paramount will find a way to regain control over Star Trek, a remerger between Viacom or Paramount or whatever it's called now with CBS, reacquiring the full Star Trek franchise and re-putting it back together. After that happens, what is canonical to Star Trek, what is Star Trek canon, will be determined by future TV shows. If a show in the future decides that there's 5 or 6 different universes, that Enterprise, Next Generation, and Voyager share a universe, and the original series and Deep Space Nine share another universe, and Discovery is in a different universe from those, and then you have the animated series and comes up with a series of ideas on how they could split and go off in different directions. If a show does that in the future and canonically changes everything and retcons things, then that's what Star Trek canon will become. That's what Star Trek canon will be. Right now, the only new Star Trek we have is Discovery. And if it pretends to be the same universe as old canonical Star Trek, that doesn't work very well. Doesn't really work. But it's kind of... They are technically licensed by traditional Star Trek standards. I would say everything that came before Star Trek Discovery would override Star Trek Discovery. But basically, what is canon? I mean, what was canon to Star Trek the original series when it was being made? Would basically be what they were going by. So they were making it up as they went along. What was canon to Next Generation was basically the original series minus the animated series, but also the movies, but not anything that Gene Roddenberry wanted to retcon. It just kind of goes on like that. By the definition of canon, it just means what's official material. So I think most Star Trek fans that were fans of the franchise for a long time definitely see some inconsistencies with Discovery, and it's perfectly understandable to say, yeah, the canon Star Trek universe and the Prime universe are two different things. But it's also a sign of how badly things are managed that you actually have to say that. But yeah, calling the Star Trek universe the Prime universe was... You can tell it's a marketing ploy to get the people that, wanted, more of the original series, more of Next Generation, and more stuff from that universe to think, oh, this is more of what I really want, not those stupid alternate reality movies. When the truth is, we just wanted more Star Trek. We didn't care if you called it canon or Prime or whatever. It didn't matter what you called it. We wanted good Star Trek. And yeah, we kind of want stuff that's canonical anyway. We don't want, we want things to be as consistent as possible. Some people fear the idea of filling in the gaps, and like such as what prequels will do. Personally, I love that idea. I would love to see the series of novels Star Trek Vanguard, which basically mostly takes place on a space station in the era of the original series. I'd love to see that turned into a canonical TV series, live action, animated, make movies out of. I don't care. I would love to see Star Trek Vanguard, the books, turned into some form of canonical Star Trek. Even just canonizing the books. But I'd love to see that adapted into something. I don't know. personally, I kind of like animation, and I would love to see it canonized. You know, that's something I would love to see, and that's something that takes place. In a way, it's both a sequel and a prequel. It'd be a sequel to Enterprise. It wouldn't be a sequel or prequel. It'd be a spin-off of the original series because it's not before or after, but it'll be a sequel to Enterprise because it'll take place after Enterprise. It'd be a prequel to Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. You know, but I would love that. I would absolutely love to see Star Trek Vanguard turned into you know, TV series of some sort. Word for word, adapt the books. You know, that'd be great. To me, it doesn't have to be future Star Trek. And the farther you go into the future with Star Trek, the more it changes the storytelling. Like, I didn't feel the technology of Next Generation really ruined the storytelling process, though. Excuse me, for some writers it did, but I think it depends on the writer doing the story. Writer that's writing this particular story. But yeah, I definitely would like to see more stories that take place after Nemesis. And I would mostly like to see it connected to the Star Trek universe that I am the most attached to. Any connection or reference to Star Trek Enterprise, Next Generation, or Deep Space Nine is something I would dearly love. Even the original series in Voyager, you know, that would make me happy to see it, a show that's connected to those shows. But yeah, and with Star Trek, I suppose you can do alternate reality TV shows without it necessarily being a reboot. It'd still be a form of spin-off because Star Trek acknowledges parallel universes. But yeah, even as a parallel universe, Star Trek Discovery doesn't work very well. But that said, in the past, non-canonical materials have been free to contradict themselves. And Star Trek Discovery has contradicted itself quite a bit. Just for an example, remember what the Constitution class Starship Enterprise looked like in Star Trek Discovery, as well as the Constitution class Starship Defiant. At one point, you see the Defiant on a view screen, and it has like these convoluted bends in the warp nacelle pylons. I mean, they're the right thickness, the right angle, except for the bends in them. Like they got some sort of joint, you know, kind of like how the Intrepid class could raise and lower its nacelles. This thing looked like it could do something similar, but why? I mean, that's not really something of the time period, and the Defiant didn't look like that. Didn't look like that in the original series, and it didn't look like that in Enterprise, you know? Then you see the Enterprise on screen, and it has warp nacelle pylons that kind of look like it's out of the movie era, except there's a little extra separate part that's also different, but it's got that angle. It's actually a good-looking ship. It's just not consistent. You know, the warp nacelle pylons are wrong. There's a few other little details that just are kind of wrong. You know, but then you see it on a view screen, and on the view screen it looks right. No, seriously, there's one point after it was shown at the final episode of season 1 and in the first episode of season 2. In that very same first episode of season 2, you can actually see it on a display monitor, and it looks like it looked like in the TV show, the original series. So Star Trek Star Trek Discovery as a storytelling agent isn't even canon to itself. It's so by saying it's not the canon universe, just straight up, it's not canon. I mean, it's free to even contradict itself. And normally, even a story that's non-canonical, that's apocryphal. I mean, usually those stories can be later contradicted, especially by canonical materials. But they normally don't contradict themselves during the same story. And not only from episode to episode did you see Constitution-class vessels change in ways that aren't really appropriate to the way they originally looked, nor the refit, but in the same episode you see the Enterprise on a view screen, that doesn't look like what it looks like when you're looking at it from space. Um, so basically, by saying this isn't canon Star Trek, is kind of like saying in a way it can be forgotten, that Star Trek Discovery can be forgotten. But that doesn't necessarily change the idea that the Prime Universe isn't a failed attempt at being the original canonical universe that we've been following. But at the same time, it obviously isn't, because the writers aren't treating it that way. Basically, I know I've been rambling, and this has gone on way too long, and this was just about me bringing this to a stop, or my final thoughts are. And, I got a notification, yeah. Anyway, ignoring the notification, just ending this, bringing this to an end. As it gets warmer here, as I now have heat and power and light, because the power was out, is in the past, canonical usually didn't mean a specific universe. It's like, but now with Star Trek, that's a sign of how bad things are. That we probably need a better name for it than the canon universe, because the mirror universe is part of canonical stories, and it's a universe, but basically it's saying all along what I knew, is that Star Trek Discovery isn't the regular universe. And it's quite possible they're going to work hard to shoehorn it into the regular universe. In fact, it seems like that's what they're trying to do, which they how much potential there is for them to do that. If they were amazing storytellers, they could shoehorn it into the main canonical universe of Star Trek. If they were amazing storytellers of high intelligence and skill, they could do it. That's not what they proved themselves to be thus far. So I wouldn't expect that. I mean, I'm sure it could be done. I just don't think it will be done. Not effectively in a way that will be truly good. So in conclusion, whatever they claim the Prime Universe is, normally we wouldn't go to copyright information, licensing. Copyright information wouldn't be the exact word. Normally we wouldn't look to a matter of licensing as to whether or not something takes place in a canonical universe. Because technically a franchise could license a story out to a particular production company, but what's made could be considered a canonical material. Normally, this wouldn't be the guideline that would determine whether or not a story is officially in the canonical universe. The standard. But that's pretty much what we're left with, is that the traditional, original Star Trek universe is just that. Star Trek. Star Trek Enterprise through to Nemesis, or if you want to just focus on the TV shows, actually that'd be part of First Contact through to Nemesis, or Enterprise through to Voyager, or whatever. However you want to look at it, that timeline, the timeline of the original series. That timeline is apparently its own universe, and any claims otherwise appear to be a marketing ploy. Because the writers have been basically deliberately told they have to make everything 25% different, and at least the production crews have been going by that rule, so it's a 25% different universe. And there is a way that they could have it 25% different than anything we've ever seen before, but they would have to stay away from using the Constitution class starships, or at least they would have to license them out to be the same and just not overuse them. They have to leave Spock out of the story, things like that. Everything that they're not doing. It could be a different time when things are 25% different. Halfway between Enterprise and the original series would fit that bill. I don't know about the uniform changes. If we were halfway between the original series and Next Generation, that might not work as well. But, things could be 25% different a decade or two after Voyager and Nemesis, There's ways it could be done, but that's not what they did. And really, I'm just repeating myself. But basically, the conclusion has been made by people online. Midnight's Edge did an excellent video on it. What legally has been Star Trek of the past is clearly what was produced under the license of Paramount and Desilu and so forth, is the Star Trek universe or multiverse of the past. And the two new universes, two timelines based on the same universe, a split timeline. But when you split the timeline, you basically get two different parallel universes. The new universes are just that, new universes. And, and it doesn't meld, doesn't mesh. The intent and goal of the writers is not to create more of the Star Trek universe we know, but just kind of cloak it in there enough for marketing purposes. So in conclusion, it's just a convoluted mess. Does it fix things to say that one universe is the canon universe, and then the next universe is the Prime universe, and then you have the Kelvin universe as the offshoot of the Prime universe, but those two universes separate from the canon universe? Does it fix things? Doesn't fix everything. Doesn't fix how bad some of those stories are. That even as an alternate universe story, it's kind of convoluted to try to even merge it into the multiverse. That's still a problem. But it fixes the idea of fitting it, trying to find a way to shoehorn it into the existing timeline. Sure, it fixes that part, which is a pretty big fix. But yeah. But at the same time, it doesn't really fix the fact that we're not getting good Star Trek, from the people who are the intellectual property holders. But that said, this season of Discovery has been getting better. Episode 2 of Season 2 was actually good enough to watch. How about that? It was actually good. Watch it. Consider it a competently written story with problems. It had problems like all the episodes, but, it was not bad. And not bad is a lot better than average for Star Trek Discovery. And then episode 4 of Season 2 had some good points. Probably not as competently written as episode 2, but episode 4 of Season 2, had its good points, Who knows what'll happen? A lot of the problems with Discovery may have actually been interference at the level of, corporate masters. Les Muniz had plans for this show. Different people had plans for this show. What's his name? Oh, I forget his name. The guy other than Alex Kurtzman, who worked on the first 2 Star Trek movies of the Kelvin universe. Supposedly he was fired when he tried to pitch a Star Trek movie that they said was too much like Star Trek. This is the mentality that we're dealing with, so we shouldn't be surprised if we don't get good Star Trek. And the one person from Bad Robot that probably should have had anything to do with Star Trek, fired, gone. He's like, what? You want to make a movie that's like Star Trek? You want to make a Star Trek movie that's like Star Trek? You're fired. That was basically what happened. In fact, the reports were that was literally what happened. Granted, condensing it down to a shorter version, but that's what happened. That was it. So that's the thing. Alex Kurtzman, I think, wants to make Star Trek more like Star Wars. Well, that is a downgrade, but I'd still consider that acceptable if he was making Star Trek like good Star Wars. But if he's going to make it like bad Star Wars, then that's a double negative. You know, that's negative and then negative on top of negative. And it's not one of those cases where the negative cancels out the other negative. It's just more negative on negative. You know, it's like, no, don't make Star Trek more like Star Wars. But, okay, if you're going to make it like Star Wars, make it like good Star Wars. Oh, no, you're not going to make it like good Star Wars? You're going to make it like bad Star Wars? Or like... That's another problem. Les Muniz, I mentioned him. I remember one of the quotes that he supposedly had is he wanted to see the SEAL Team 6 or 7 or whatever it was. SEAL Team 6 of Star Trek, I think is what he said. The SEAL Team 6 of Star Trek. And that just makes me think it's like this person should have no influence on Star Trek. No, don't. No, don't. No, if you're looking for a SEAL Team 6 in Star Trek, you're not looking for Star Trek. Sorry, no. No, I mean, I would actually favor a diverse variety of forms of Star Trek. In fact, if you wanted to make a Star Trek that's kind of like Star Wars, good Star Wars preferably, and a Star Trek that's kind of like Stargate, and a Star Trek that's kind of like Babylon 5, and maybe one that's a little bit more like the Orville, you know, that kind of is similar to other things that are out there, not a bad idea. But if you're looking to make one particular Star Trek show, especially to start with, if you're going to start a new Star Trek franchise, you know, a bunch of Star Trek shows, if you're like trying to look to the Star Trek universe to get like the SEAL Team 6 of Star Trek, well, I suppose if it wasn't the United Federation of Planets, it'd be kind of like, well, maybe, but even then, no. I mean, actually, you know, with Section 31, maybe something. No, for the most part, no. Just no. I feel as though if you know anything about Star Trek, it's too exoteric for me to really think of a way to explain it that's you know, I just have to ramble. It's like, no, you know, it's so exoteric. It's like just to stop and describe it just seems wrong and unnecessary. It's like, yeah, you already get the point. That's just not Star Trek. That's, yeah. And if you don't understand Star Trek, it will be like too long for me to explain that just doesn't belong in Star Trek. It's like, and I've already rambled too much. So many people in charge of Star Trek Discovery. It could have been ruined at the corporate level. Maybe the writers aren't as incompetent as we think. Levels of production can really screw with things. So, you know, I'm not gonna just try to blame the writers, though it is a sign that the writers are probably incompetent. But maybe not. Who knows? Who knows what happens to the scripts when they get passed in? I don't know. But Star Trek Discovery doesn't fit. Can it be shoehorned into the regular timeline? A genius writer could pull it off. If they had a genius production company backing them up. I don't think that's going to happen. And right now, it just really works as a parallel universe. And really, that's all I can say over and over and over again. I mean, it's just like, it seems so odd to have to say, well, the canonical material is its own universe, and this new stuff that's, you know, seems to be official and made as if it's official is just, you know, apocryphal material that's not canonical. Like, that's usually the difference. It's not about what universe it's supposed to be taking in place in, whether or not something is canonical. that's basically what we're left with. That's all there is to it. So we're still waiting for new Star Trek, and Star Trek Discovery is a parallel universe officially licensed to use the Star Trek name, which maybe through some mutation of time travel and things altering the timeline could be a variation of the universe of Star Trek First Contact and Star Trek the original series and Star Trek the Next Generation and so forth. Maybe it's all part. Maybe maybe it's a parallel universe that's connected to it. Maybe it's just a nonsensical fever dream of somebody that wanted to write a Star Trek story. Whatever happens to the Star Trek universe, basically right now it's just as undetermined as ever, because Star Trek Discovery, it's just a reminder that Star Trek Discovery, it's even unsure how much it counts. And if Paramount, CBS, Viacom, all that merges back together and everything is the same as it once was, and the Star Trek licenses, everything Star Trek is all under the same control, and if whoever's in control of that says Star Trek Discovery is canon to the main universe of Star Trek, and if the main universe of Star Trek does include the Star Trek shows that we've always watched, then unfortunately, that means Star Trek Discovery just got canonized by that situation. We'll only know when something like that happens. But as it stands now, you got to kind of say, yeah, that Star Trek Discovery does not look canonical. And I'm just repeating myself, if your standard is whether or not something's a licensed Star Trek, or whether it's, the actual right from the copyright holder, or if it's licensed, this is Star Trek Discovery is technically licensed material. So it's just another novel or another comic. The only difference is, in the past, the novels and the comics had to conform to the canonical Star Trek. So again, that's kind of defies the idea of calling one the canonical universe and the other one the prime universe. But however you look at it, it's not the same universe. It's not the same. And the more I try to ramble, the more I try to just find a way to describe it simply, the more it's just a big long ramble that's gone on way too long according to this. So I'm going to end this for real. And this time I'm not ending it because the power's gone out, unless it goes to black before I actually end this. And at this point, I'm really rambling bad, because it's so hard to word something that absurd. Star Trek always had canonical and non-canonical materials. To actually say that there's a TV series that's not canonical, to say that to use the term canonical universe as a parallel universe to the prime universe, that is a very awkward, way to look at things when you think of what canon traditionally meant. But basically, the Star Trek Prime universe is not the real Star Trek universe. It's not the old Star Trek universe, and I might as well end this. Basically, there's 3 Star Trek universes. Only one of them truly matters. That's the one with Captain Archer and Captain Picard. Actually, they all have Archer and Picard. It's the one that we saw in Enterprise, the original series. The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. Because even Voyager didn't get things as convoluted as Discovery. Star Trek Discovery, STD, the fungal infection of the Star Trek multiverse. Okay, I'm ending this. Feel free to look for more of my videos wherever possible. If you manage to listen to me ramble on this long, I must have done something entertaining. Look for my videos, wherever. Here on YouTube, apparently. You can also find some on BitChute and DTube and wherever. I'm on Steemit and Whale Shares, which is a lot like Steemit, but technically it's its own separate blockchain, but similar. I think a lot of the same people that developed one worked on the other. So there's connections. Steemit and Whale Shares. And Subscribe Star. Feel free to look for me on Subscribe Star, and feel free to throw some money at me there. It's a way to fund content creators and whatever. And whatever. Whatever. I really ought to end this live video log, and it's this really bad ramble, but yeah, Star Trek Discovery, I've watched it. I've had some entertainment value from it. But if you have any standards, it's not going to work very well. If you go into it realizing it's just bad Star Trek, or it's not even real Star Trek, I don't even know what to say about it. It's if you've watched it, you know what to think of it. But there's more wrong with it than just the fact it doesn't fit the Star Trek universe. Yeah. Star Trek original. Maybe that'd be a better word than saying Star Trek canon universe. Star Trek original universe. There's got to be a better way of wording it. But yeah. Prime is not canon. That's a good statement. And a lot of people have discussed this with a lot better than I am discussing it now. So I'm ending this. I'm ending this for real. I said I was going to end this. I think it's the house is warming up now, and I got power and things are great. So I really time for me to end this. Yeah, this is yeah. All right, so I'm going to press the button and end this. Feel free to look for more of my videos elsewhere. Whatever.